Mr. Saktiandi Supaat.
Mr. Speaker, sir. First of all, I would like to declare I'm an employee in a foreign bank in the financial sector. I would like to join the motion by focusing on the related issue of globalization and digitalization. As it relates to the two motions, I think the motion by the Minister for Finance, who actually has elaborated on how FTAs and efforts by the government to help raise livelihoods and created many quality jobs for Singaporeans. Very stark contrast to PSP's motion by Mr. Leong Man Wai, which casts doubts in some ways on our various FTAs, and the various FTAs is mentioned earlier on. So very important, stark contrast. And also I'll talk about how Singaporeans, especially mid-career employees aged 40 to 60, and PMATs in sectors perceived to be affected by foreign talents and students who hope to join the workforce, and how they should take advantage of new opportunities in spite of the current economic environment. First, we have benefited from globalization in many ways in Singapore. Singapore and other countries in the region have reaped substantial dividends from pursuing an export-oriented development strategy. And by opening up our economy via multilateral and bilateral free trade agreements and participating in global value chains, we were able to industrialize and grow rapidly for long periods, and in the process transform into middle or high-income countries like Singapore. Inadvertently, Singapore has also built a reputation as a key hub in Southeast Asia, and in some cases globally, for finance, transshipment activities, business services, transportation, and logistics. We should do our utmost to keep it that way. We also have a robust manufacturing base, which is a keynote in the complex value chains that wrap around East Asia. As a global financial center, Singapore is ranked fourth behind only London, New York, and Hong Kong, and ahead of Tokyo in the 2018 Global Financial Centers Index. Total assets under management in Singapore stood at $4.7 trillion in 2020, having increased at around 15 to 17% compound annual growth rate over the previous 5 years. In fact, financial and fintech sectors created 2,500 jobs and are expected to create 6,500 more in 2021, particularly in technology, wealth management, corporate banking, and insurance. So I'm a bit confused when Mr. Leong Man Wai mentioned that over the past 10, 20 years, opportunities for Singaporeans and in various sectors have not improved. Singapore is also a favored location for multinational companies with more than 7,000 operating some form of headquarters in the city-state. It also hosts 4,200 regional headquarter operations. This is considerably more than Hong Kong, with 1,389 regional headquarters, Sydney with 533, Tokyo with 531, and Shanghai with 470. We have many Singaporeans working in these MNCs, some of whom are also in this chamber now. Despite these core strengths, Singapore's economy needs to continue growing. By how much is a matter of debate. Arguably, to remain an attractive, vibrant economic hub, Singapore's economy needs to grow at around 2 to 3% per year, which is feasible for a high-income country like Singapore. The challenge, however, is finding where this growth will come from to continue creating jobs for Singaporeans without coming out with changes to measures or policies that may unravel our long-term growth. In the meantime, for small and open economies, continued engagement with world markets in various ways, including free trade agreements across many countries, including the US, Australia, China, and even India, is not a choice, but an economic imperative. It is because of our persistent belief in free trade and our active engagement with countries that are willing to be equal partners in areas of trade, travel, services, and so on. And in spite of some adjustments to our trade policies over the years, we remain one of the most market-oriented and open economies in the world. So by participating actively in the global economy, we have made it easier to move internationally. And this in turn accelerates the factors for labor mobility, enabling Singaporeans to seek more opportunities and experiences overseas. The discussion so far from the start has been talking also mostly about domestic jobs created for Singaporeans in Singapore, which is valid and which is really something that we should discuss on. But we should also discuss about opportunities for Singaporeans going abroad, and the fact that our discussion today, talking about these two motions, in my view, and also talking to the markets, is very closely watched by the rest of the world. In particular, concerns about our principles about free trade and about our view about foreign talent has an impact on how we are perceived by the rest of the world. As of 2019, the population of Singaporeans living and working overseas stands at over 34,000, and maybe even more. We are sought after in regions of growth such as China, India, Middle East, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Indonesia, and many more countries, I'm sure, because of our skills and bilingualism. That is also because the government has invested in some of these regions and has kept a relatively comfortable stance on foreign talent as a key hub for many sectors. We have to be mindful that any change in stance to foreign talent or signs of xenophobia creeping into our policies will signal to other countries this shift in the markets and inevitably in the long run also have an impact on our future Singaporean workers venturing abroad. With the pandemic, more Singaporean talent abroad have decided to come home, but they have brought back with them highly valued international insights on innovation and culture. As representatives of Singapore, they shared Singaporean work ethic of high efficiency and reliability to the rest of the world, so that Singaporeans will remain sought-after employees. And our policies in Singapore contributed to that, and eventually them coming back home. So globalization allows for different cultures and economic systems around the world to become connected and to integrate with each other because of the influence of large MNCs and of global communication. Yet it takes a certain type of person to truly comprehend this and turn this into an advantage. And I come across a resident which I thought was interesting. The Singapore resident works in an international petroleum trading company in Singapore which trades across Asia, Australia, and Middle East. She said that when the pandemic broke out, the Singapore office was literally the only office that was getting things done. And because of Singapore's multicultural, multilingual characteristics, the multinational staff here were able to help fill the gaps in communications between the other offices. One example she gave was being good with understanding accents, and another was being cognizant to the needs of some international colleagues who needed time off for religious activities and having an adequate support system in place in preparation. Consequently, she also noted the threat of remote working from anywhere in the world casting instability on jobs. While it is important to stay vigilant and humble, Singaporeans have little to fear because we have good international reputation and unique ability to contribute to a global mindset to the employer. But what is clear is that there are other more pertinent and major challenges to our Singaporean jobs in MNCs, such as disruptive technology and digital labor markets or remote working. So globalization is not only seen in economic activities, it also includes proliferation of technologies where communications and distribution networks are becoming very significant in people's lives. This brings me to my next point on digitalization of the economy. In Singapore, technological adoption is even more urgent in view of the country's aging population and compositional shifts of the labor force over the next decade. The working age population has probably peaked already in 2018-2019, and the resident labor force growth will slow to 0.7% per annum over the next decade, from 1.6% per average between 2011 and 2016. So for Singapore to sustain healthy growth and living standards to continue rising, it must keep leveraging technology to drive productivity growth and new growth areas, such as, for example, in smart energy, healthcare, technology-related sectors. That will constitute part of where the opportunities will lie. The government has taken the lead to create a nationwide movement dedicated to this. Under SG Digital, there is a plethora of programs and grants to help businesses, individuals looking to get into relevant sectors, and a community of people who rely on it for their daily life. So with the increase in digitalization of more industries, it is already creating a global demand for ICT talents and relevant roles in maintaining the security and functionality of these digital systems. And this has contributed to the increase in the number of ICT talents working in Singapore. So the benefits of globalization for small open economies such as Singapore is there, but there are challenges associated with globalization, and Minister Lawrence has highlighted that and a few others here as well. We need to take stock of the current tensions arising from the uneven distributional effects of globalization. We know that, and the potential dislocations posed by new technology. The government has over the past decades taken practical policy measures to mitigate the side effects of globalization and achieve inclusive growth. We should enhance these efforts, and as mentioned in the motion by Minister Lawrence. But at the same time, we need to also be cognizant that we are an economy in transition, facing a demographic, shrinking population issue, rising inequalities, and competitiveness issues as we become a more mature economy. Mr. Speaker, in Malay, please. Salah satu segmen warga Singapura yang menghadapi kesan globalisasi setiap hari adalah pencari kerja pertengahan kerjaya dan pekerja dalam lingkungan usia 40 hingga 60 tahun yang merasa bimbang dengan keadaan pekerjaan semasa dan kecenderungan terhadap digitalisasi. Ini bukan kerana mereka tidak mahu mengambil kemahiran baru. Sebenarnya kebanyakan rakyat Singapura menyedari bahawa belajar kemahiran digital adalah satu-satunya jalan ke hadapan. Menurut tinjauan baru-baru ini, 98% responden berusia antara 56 dan 65 tahun percaya pada peningkatan kemahiran dan peningkatan kemahiran untuk tetap relevan. Program SG United Mid-Career Pathways telah diperluas dan dipertingkatkan untuk memenuhi permintaan. Saya berharap dapat meminta pemerintah untuk berkongsi mengenai rancangan jangka panjang program ini dan meningkatkannya dengan kemas kini atau kajian semula, dan sama ada kita akan melihat pelbagai pekerjaan dan peranan lebih besar. Dengan program Tech Skills Accelerator atau TESA yang dilancarkan pada tahun 2016, terdapat kursus-kursus untuk mereka dalam kerjaya pertengahan atau mid-career tanpa pengalaman yang relevan untuk melatih mereka menjadi software developer, menganalisis data dan pereka UX. Syarikat berteknologi besar antarabangsa seperti Google dan IBM serta majikan tempatan telah bergabung untuk menyediakan kursus dan latihan traineeship. Antara April 2016 dan September 2020, TESA menempatkan lebih dari 7,000 warga Singapura ke pekerjaan teknologi. Saya berharap dapat melihat rancangan pemerintah untuk meningkatkan ketersediaan program latihan dan penempatan kerjaya pertengahan untuk sektor teknologi, terutama bagi pencari kerja pertengahan kerjaya yang mendapati kesusahan sewaktu ini. Saya percaya ini akan membantu mengurangkan beberapa kekurangan tenaga kerja untuk sektor teknologi sambil membantu lebih banyak pencari kerja pertengahan kerjaya untuk mendapatkan kemahiran dan pekerjaan di industri yang berkembang pesat. Oleh itu, mereka yang berada dalam kumpulan umur ini ada banyak peluang untuk meningkatkan kemahiran anda, memperoleh kemahiran baru dan membantu anda bangkit untuk menghadapi cabaran. Globalisasi dan digitalisasi membuka bab baru dalam kehidupan kita. Kami melihat banyak yang akan dapat menukar kerjaya sehingga mereka tidak terjebak dalam industri sunset. Kumpulan lain yang juga difahami kerisauan adalah pelajar yang baru saja lulus dalam situasi pandemik sekarang. Umpamanya lulusan universiti, politeknik dan ITE. Saya senang hati perhatikan bahawa mulai April 2021, permintaan untuk SG United Traineeships atau attachments telah berkurang apabila graduan baru mendapat latihan traineeship lain atau peluang pekerjaan sepenuh masa. Yang lain mengambil kontrak selama setahun atau lebih. Tetapi ada yang masih menghadapi masalah untuk mendapatkan pekerjaan tetap sepenuh masa dan bergantung pada internships dan projek sampingan. Pada masa ini, ia adalah masalah global untuk semua kohort yang lulus kerana syarikat-syarikat di seluruh dunia mengecilkan jumlah pengambilan pekerja. Mereka juga menghadapi persaingan dari warga Singapura lain yang juga mencari pekerjaan. Dan dalam mengambil projek sampingan dan pekerjaan gig dalam talian, mereka juga mungkin menghadapi persaingan dari luar negara. Globalisasi atau kaitannya dengan kemasukan bakat asing tidak boleh disalahkan dalam hal ini. Sebaliknya, keadaan timbul kerana pandemik COVID-19. Sebelum wabak ini, banyak pelajar tempatan telah mendapat manfaat daripada program pertukaran dan internship di luar negara. Ini adalah persaingan global kerana seluruh dunia mengalami kesan krisis wabak ini. Tuan Speaker, saya rasa ia penting untuk mengakui ketidakpastian dan ketakutan dalam iklim ekonomi semasa. Tetapi tidak ada gunanya kita mempunyai pandangan pesimis. Kerana itu hanya akan menyebabkan kita kehilangan peluang yang timbul dari krisis ini. Memang, banyak yang mendapati diri mereka terpaksa menangguhkan pekerjaan impian mereka dan menempuh jalan kerja yang sama sekali baru dan tidak dijangka. Sebilangan penduduk muda menjadi suara bersambilan untuk menjana pendapatan, tanpa disangka-sangka mengetahui minat mereka terhadap penjagaan kesihatan dan dalam sektor itu. Kisah sebegini sebenarnya agak biasa. Warga Singapura dari pelbagai generasi telah melalui krisis yang berbeza di mana mereka harus mengubah jalan mereka kerana keterbatasan masa itu. Misalnya semasa krisis kewangan Asia atau bahkan pada hari-hari pasca kemerdekaan. Pada hari ini, ramai yang mungkin berkongsi perasaan kecewa dan kegelisahan yang serupa. Tetapi perbezaannya ialah kita mempunyai lebih banyak sumber daya hari ini daripada yang dimiliki oleh ibu bapa dan datuk nenek kita. Dan kita mampu untuk tetap lebih optimistik selagi kita menguruskan ekspektasi kita dan melakukan yang terbaik dengan peluang yang ada. Marilah kita meningkatkan usaha untuk memperkukuhkan teras dan kehidupan pekerja Singapura kita. Mula-mula saya ingin mengambil kesempatan ini untuk menyampaikan penghargaan kepada pemerintah kerana telah membuat keputusan penting untuk menerapkan amalan dan garis panduan pengambilan pekerjaan adil TAFEP ke dalam undang-undang. Pengambilan pekerjaan yang adil adalah subjek yang selalu terdekat di hati saya. Hanya apabila akses yang sama terhadap peluang pekerjaan, kita dapat berbicara tentang mewujudkan pekerjaan yang baik untuk semua orang Singapura. Sekarang jika TAFEP telah diberi lebih banyak kuasa untuk menegakkan hukuman terhadap diskriminasi tempat kerja dan pengambilan pekerjaan, ini akan mengurangkan beberapa kerisauan yang dialami oleh pekerja lanjut usia dan minoriti kita. Mr. Speaker, my next point is on PMETs, working in sectors where foreign talents are perceived to be a threat. I work in the financial sector and I do talk with those in the sector as they share their lived experiences. I can empathize with them and their concerns. Understandably, some sectors, especially the ICT sector, face a talent crunch too. Employers find that in the short term, it takes too much resources and time to hire and train a Singaporean, so they would prefer to hire an experienced and skilled foreigner. With the recent tightening of foreign manpower restrictions and newly enshrined anti-discrimination laws coming, I believe gradually but surely, more Singaporeans should eventually find their anxieties easing. But this does not solve the immediate problems of skill shortage in the sector. In the financial sector, for example, in the foreign banks, the deliberations on foreign staff recruitment are done at the bank's global HQ level to fill any shortage of skilled staff and are based on specific global business needs and internal human capital movement requirements. Therefore, to ensure that all levels of the bank, the locals will eventually be the majority, may not be possible given the global nature of these decisions. All said, I must point out that there are Singaporeans who are holding senior roles in the foreign banks based on merit. And it is not necessarily a situation where foreigners are the only ones dominating the senior positions. I, for one, know, and even if you do a quick search on Google and LinkedIn, would show Singaporeans heading the business units or are in a very senior positions in the Union Bank of Switzerland, UBS, I won't mention the names, even in Julius Baer, Deutsche Bank Private Banking, HSBC Private Banking, and Pictet. And also Singaporeans holding front office positions, such as the global head of treasury markets at Standard Chartered Bank. I'm sure there are many more. And again, with the recent tightening of foreign manpower restrictions and the newly enshrined anti-discrimination laws coming, some of these anxieties can be addressed where there are wrongful practices. In addition, I would like to urge the government to explore even the possibility of enhancing the capability transfer program. I think the leader of the opposition mentioned this, and I've even mentioned this in my German motions previously in 2019 and in various occasions. I understand that I've been very persistent in this, but I believe it will bring about several benefits. Fewer companies are sending Singaporeans overseas for training in this climate, so why not redeploy the funds to support the cause for employers to have their new and existing local hires receive training and mentorship under a more experienced and skilled foreign employee in the company. In the long run, this helps to build up the local talent core. It helps to reinforce the main purpose of having foreign talents in the first place, which is to help companies, including local employees, improve as a whole, not to steal our jobs. The foreign employee will receive a boost to his CV. It is a winning situation for all. Mr. Speaker, as we debate the issues of foreign talent policy and jobs, Be mindful that globalization of labor and talent have always been much slower to globalize compared to via the movements of material goods and financial capital across countries. This is due to the complex nature of talent and apprehension of domestic populations on attracting labor inputs from abroad and host the individual, either temporarily or permanently, near the location of the work to be performed. For a variety of reasons, this has proven politically unpopular, and nearly all countries place restrictions on migrations, Singapore included. But ongoing trends by MNCs and companies globally via offshoring before and still now, build-up of digital labor markets have the potential to radically alter the global labor market, making overshooting in foreign talent policy responses by any country lead to more negative outcomes and worse. It supports xenophobic and racist behaviors that can worsen domestically. These digital labor market platforms can connect workers worldwide with companies seeking to have tasks completed, and with technology, this can go beyond data entry and programming roles only. Worse, if the MNCs see Singapore's hub status eroded because of too tight foreign talent policies or any signaling thereof in that direction. And here I would like to refer to Mr. Leong Man Wai's suggestion earlier that he intends to recommend PRs and new citizenships numbers to be reduced going forward. Just want to highlight that the debate today, and I think some of the previous speakers have mentioned this, the debate today is mainly about foreign manpower vis-a-vis our economic strategy. Immigration is a separate topic which covers a much broader range of imperatives. Immigration and work passes are separate regimes with different considerations. Immigration policy is very carefully calibrated. Potential applicants know that we are very strict in Singapore. Our population growth over the last decade has been the lowest since our independence, and we have kept the size of our PR population stable for years. Many of our new citizens and PRs are spouses of Singaporeans and parents of Singaporean children. So I'd like to ask Mr. Leong, does Mr. Leong think that these family members of our fellow Singaporeans ought to wait longer? There have been calls from members of this House, including members from the WP, for us to be more expedient in granting permanent residency of PRs and citizenship, especially for family members of Singaporeans. So I think it's pertinent. So let me give you an example from the ground. A 40-year-old resident who is a Singaporean citizen, works hard as a private hire car driver, has a Malaysian wife and children who wants to be PRs. The question is, how long does Mr. Leong want her and the children to wait before they can be granted PRs? And I think most of the members in this chamber have from time to time seen residents coming to them for help in this regard. And how long do you want their children to pay more for their school fees? So I would like to pose that question to Mr. Leong. And to go on, I urge all in Singapore, we need to channel our efforts positively towards building back better, which begins with an understanding that our challenges are complex and cannot be resolved by narrow ideology on globalization and foreign talent policy. Understanding the complexity of modern society, the working of relationship of democracy and capitalism, and recognizing the prevalence of externalities are the first steps towards genuinely healing our social, economic, and financial issues amid this current crisis. For those broad reasons and various reasons I've mentioned in my speech above, I'm not able to support the motion in the name of Mr. Leong Man Wai. I support the motion in the name of the Minister for Finance, as it affirms that Singapore needs to stay open and connected to the world. It acknowledges the anxieties whilst at the same time laying out the existing calls for enhancements needed to policies to secure livelihoods of Singaporeans in the long run. The latter too does not stir up racism and xenophobia,
Mr. Saktiandi,
and is mindful of securing Singaporean jobs and livelihoods in the long run. To wrap up, Mr. Speaker, our success in globalization isn't something that came with a drop of a hat. As far back as in February 1972, our then Foreign Minister S. Rajaratnam visualized embracing the world as our hinterland. We were faced with many challenges, but instead of crying foul, we came up with the new ideas and bravely ventured ahead. We had to change our mindset from being an entrepreneur center to look globally. We were put on the path to be a global city. That vision, that wisdom has helped to put us to where we are today. So I quote the late Mr. Rajaratnam in his speech saying, "But the global city now in its infancy, is the child of modern technology. It is the city that electronic communications, supersonic planes, giant tankers, and modern economic and industrial organization have made inevitable. Whether the global city would be a happier place than the megapolis out of those crumbling ruins it is emerging will depend on how wisely and boldly we shape its direction and growth. So very true words to remember. How can we be a happier place will depend on how wisely and boldly we shape its direction and growth. That is what we call to do today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.